Okay, so what we're going to train on today is the cost management, specifically the contract side of cost management. A couple weeks ago, you guys may have noticed that the cost management, we split out the links to the different tabs that used to be displayed. The reason for doing that was for speed alone. All of the same information is there, being the estimate info, contract info, commitment info, and summary info, and then the events are still held in the same containers. There's a new one up here called Pay Apps coming soon that will not lead you anywhere, but just to get everybody excited and understand that we will be doing Pay Apps both up and down. When I have more information on that, I will share it, of course. But today we're going to do everything on the contract side. So to step back, we do pull up, if you are connected to a 300 server, we do pull up your estimate and your contract schedule of values into this item right here. If you're a 100 user, we will be having that connector available as well, but right now it would be more of a manual input. So for this specific job, this is my contract side. We can, as you may or may not know, handle quick adds as well as extras on the contract side and the estimate side. So you can see here on the top, we sort down to your original schedule of values, and then below that, we're going to put all the quick add items in here. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to walk through of how, and we'll track the process of creating a change order and step it through the different processes, and I'll go back so you can see where the money is being allocated. So we'll use line item 16 here so you can see when it comes up to pending and when it comes up to approved. Okay? Again, for cost management on the contract side, this was the contract info page. The pending and approved changes, this would be within SCPC. We also have accounting approved. The reason we do that is because we don't limit you to only write your change orders in SCPC. So if you do want to write them in the back office, you're more than free to do that. And this allows you to see what may have been synced or may not have been synced between the two. So if you have a differing number, such as this, where the approved says 1,000 and the accounting approved says 2,000, this shows that there's something in accounting that was written that was not written in SCPC. A good note to take note of is that if the numbers are not written in SCPC, the forecasting module takes these two columns here. Again, let me say that again. Forecasting brings in the pending and approved from the SCPC change orders. Okay. Going back to cost management, we're going to spend the rest of the time in the contract events. So in the contract events, this may look similar or different from your listing of cost types. We have 8 different types of costs that you can include in here. I have 5 being shown. We do have 3 that are mandatory. The first one would be the potential change order. The reason that's mandatory, even though that might not be in your process or steps of creating a change event, is because from open issues, from RFIs, and punch lists, you can create a PCO. Again, open issues, punch lists, and RFIs, create a PCO. You'll see a button up on the top. If you click that button, it's going to create a PCO right here in this line item. Typically, when training, we'll just tell people that this is going to be exactly what it says, a potential. You might not know the definitive cost right now, but you just want some type of a container to hold what could be coming up potentially. So that's what the potential change order area would be used for. Another mandatory field is the change order request. Change order requests are mandatory just because we want to have at least one place you can process a change order, a lower tier of a change order into a change order. So the change order request is exactly that. Typically, if you're talking about normal, maybe typical type operations, a change order request would be when you have actual numbers and you need to have net negotiations with your client or owner at that point to work out that change order on the owner side. The other item that's mandatory is the change order. In the change order state, that is what communicates back to 300 if you're a 300 customer. It will be what communicates back when we're a 100 customer. The change order state is here. You can write a change order directly there. What we're going to do today is I'm going to do a 3-step, which I'll start with a potential, go to a change order request, and then a change order. That doesn't mean you have to do the same thing. You can start at change order request. You can start at any point actually in this and process to a change order if you want. You don't even need a process. You can just write change orders if that's the way you'd like to run your change order request. But just to show the flow for everybody, I'm going to do a 3-step. I'm also going to show potentially an internal event if we have the time to do so. An internal event would be a budget or an estimate cost transfer. So if you have a buyout on one line item and you want to move that money into another line item, that's where you're going to do it with the internal. So this will not have a contract line item. Again, I'll do this at the end so you can see the difference, but as we're stepping through this, for change orders, you're going to have to assign a contract line item. With an internal event, you will not, because it's only affecting your estimate. Okay, for setup, just a couple other things. We do have workflow. I'll cover workflow actually in a different one, but just know that your workflow is here. You can create work items here, and then this would be the process of people who would step through that workflow for any of the change order items that are being created here. Another setup portion, I'm going to go to project setup, would be the, right here, would be your markups. So you don't have to have markups if you don't want to. If you have a contract that will have a standard set of markups, I would suggest that you put them in your project setup default at the bottom. And you can add, because it's easier to add them in the defaults and then edit them if you want. We do have some customers down here that will use this markup as rounding off of pennies. Since we do not round in any of our change events, if people do want them to be even numbers, they add a line here to round those off, since you can hit the pencil, which I'll show you as well when we're doing the cost event, to change the number that's actually done with the markup. A quick instructional about this is that you can add any markup item here. You can add a description, put the percentage, and then these check boxes are which category that markup is going to apply to. So you can see right here, this fee 5% is not going to be applied to any labor, material, or equipment cost types, only the subcontract cost types. So just know that the change order process down here with the defaults that we'll see coming up are in your project setup under default. Okay? So I'm going to go back into cost management, go to my contract events, and I'm going to start that potential change order. I'm going to hit create cost event. Right when you hit it, you'll notice that the cost event number is TBD. Since this project is tied to 300, we do not duplicate any type of number. So when I hit save, we get that index number and assign this to the next integer, so we don't have duplicate numbers. Subject, I'm going to put this as seminar PCO number 1. I'll make the scope the same. The reasons, these reasons can change. If they don't make sense for your company, you can always go back to project setup and in the list management change these reasons to whatever makes sense to you. The contract item, and I'm going to do this 2 different ways. You can see I can add a new contract item, which would be a quick add to your schedule of values, or I can select one of the existing schedule values. We were going to use 16. Notes are not required. Let's put them in there. Now I'm going to save changes. So what this is going to do, that's going to save my header, and then I can start building out my change order. So you see once I hit that, we got the cost event number. We have the status is pending. You don't need to put in dates if you don't want to, but it brought in the information that I initially filled in. Going through the different types of buttons, we have architect status and owner status. What this does is this is really, if you're allowing your architect and owner to come in here, this is a sign-off. It signs that they've logged in, who it was. I'm logged in as the project manager, so it marked me. But if they are logged in, it's just giving them a timestamp of when they're coming in and approving this. You can, as I had, you can also hit it yourself. If you wanted to mark that when you got that approval from them, you can hit it and it'll also mark it there. In order to approve the change order, these are not required to be hit. They're just an additional way to keep timing and tracking, and when you come back to this in the future, you'll understand a little bit more of what went on with the approval system. So these are here only for tracking. They are not mandatory to hit approve. Here's the workflow that I showed you earlier. You can add replies like you can the other one. With workflow, what I would suggest if someone rejects it, that you ask them to add replies of why they're rejecting it. So that's why the replies and the workflow will work together. And then here are the cost event line items. This is where you're going to build out your change event. And you'll see I'll start getting quicker as I go because no matter whether I'm in the potential change order, the change order request, or the change order, the process is going to be the exact same. So I'm going to add a new item. And I'm going to add two different types of items. I have an equipment, quantity 1. I'm going to put this as line item number 1. The credit and the markup. There are two different ways to do credits. It's personal preference. If you want to do a negative, you can put a negative 100 in here. And when you save that, that'll make it negative. You can also put a positive 100 in here and hit credit, and that's going to make the subtotal negative 100 when I hit save. This markup is whether you want to apply the markups below to this specific line item or not. So if I have it unchecked, none of this will be calculated. If I do have it checked, which I'll keep it checked, you'll see that I do apply markup down here. Extras group, if there is an extra that you want to apply to this line item, this is where you're affecting your estimate. So up top, again, was your contract line item. This is your estimate line item. We're going to go to 16. Let me scroll down a bit. I'm going to go to 16. Oops. We are equipment. Let's see if we have a 16 equipment. We only have subcontractor type, so that's fine. We'll put a subcontractor type of 16, and I'm going to change my item type to subcontractor to match. So when you have subcontractor type item subcontract, it's going to ask me what contract I want to be assigned to that. It'll bring up a drop-down of all of the commitments I have written. If you don't have a commitment for this specific one, so let's say that you have this being a potential electrical, you need to add more conduit, but you don't have the electrician on board yet or committed, you can leave this to be determined and then fill in that subcontractor later at a later time. I do have an electrician, I believe, somewhere in here, Apple Electrical Company, so I'm going to apply them to this specific item. And then I'm going to go back down and apply that 16 cost code to this. And hit save. I'm going to make another line item now, which is not going to be type subcontractor. It's just going to be a type equipment or material, whatever. It doesn't really matter. This is how you'd build it out. So you can build out one-to-many. You just pick the item type. I'll make it other. It's going to refresh. I'm going to put in, this is line number 2. I'm going to make this $400 too. And I'm just going to apply this to a GC's. Hit save. All right. So at this time, I'll go down to the markups, and you'll see how this was marked up. So I had markup being applied to both of these. Let me click up a little bit. If you remember when I showed you the markups in default, the subcontract was the only one that would apply to the fee. So you'll see if I come here, the fee is coming here for the subcontract line item. For the other line item, you'll see that there is no fee being applied to that. This is the other column, which applies to the other subcontract, so you can see the markups for each category that I assign those item types to. You can attach documents to this, so if there is follow-up, if you have pictures, if you have some type of an email, you can always attach those documents here to keep them with it. Back up to the top, this holds my values, so this is adding up all my markup. This is my pending amount, and this is the total of the potential change order. Okay, so I'm going to save this, and I'll go back and show you where this is all being held. So if I go into contract events, under potential change orders, you'll see number 65, which I was working on with reason this, has a pending of 200 with a markup fees of 29. Has the current status of pending as it goes away. I'm going to move this from pending to approve. It says items successfully approved. One thing to note is when you hit approve, all the items below are approved with that specific potential change order. So you don't have to go down and click individual ones. They will all be approved when you do that. So now you can see that the status is approved for each one of these. Another thing you'll notice that I'll cover in the change order request spot is the yellow button. From any point that I create a subcontract type item here, I can create a commitment event for that specific subcontractor directly from the owner contract side change order. And that's how I'm going to start next week's or 2 weeks from now. I'm going to start the commitment side change events. Okay, so right now this potential change order is in the approved status and I'm going to process it. What processing does is that takes it to the next level. So as I mentioned, I'm doing a 3-step. I could push this all the way to a change order if I'd like, but I'm going to go do a change order request. You'll see when I process this from change order request to a change order, it's going to be the same type of options that I have a destination for the cost event. Do I want to create a new one or do I want to push it into an existing? I'm going to create a new one. The difference between copy or summarize is that if I summarize, it's going to take those 2 line items and make it 1 line item. I'm going to copy them so I bring over both line items into this change order request. So you can see that the change order request was written, it put in the next number, and it brought over all of the information from that PCO. If I scroll down, you'll see that the 2 line items that I had in the PCO are now included here and they're in the pending state. I'm going to add 1 more line item just to show you that you can add at any point. So if I had a PCO and then it comes to the change order request and I missed one of the line items in that PCO, that's completely fine. I can add it at any point that I want. A couple questions I have been asked before. You can have multiple line items to the same same cost code. So if I wanted to put 1045 insurance, if I want to put 5 towards that cost code, you certainly can do that. It's not a one type option. As I go through, if I remember other questions that have been asked, I'll answer those as well. So you can see I've added a 3rd line item here, these being processed over. So I'm going to go back and show you where this is listed now. So if I go back to cost management, go to contract events, we went from the PCO to the change order request. So now if I want to see this change order request, here it is, number 28, seminar PCO number 1 for $1,200 because I added the money to it with $169 of markup. I'm going to click on here and I'll do the same thing. I'm going to approve, which will approve all 3 items now. And I'm going to process this into a change order. I'm going to make it a new one, and I'm going to copy them over. So now you'll see that this changed to a change order, so I know I'm there. It's change order number 60. It's in the pending state. All the information, again, was brought over. You can edit that information at any point that you want. If you do change something up top in the header, make sure you always hit Save Changes because since it is a browser, you need to initiate to tell it to save that information. If I go down toward the bottom, you'll see I have these line items here, the 3 that I brought over. Again, if I wanted to add another one, I could certainly do that. If I screwed up and I was like, oh, I need to take out one of the line items, I can certainly do that as well by checking it and deleting it. If I come down to the bottom, I did want to show you where I can edit the markup. So if I'm in the change order state and the owner says, I don't want to pay you the $100 on that equipment for markup, you can go into the edit button and type in whatever number you think it should be, or they asked you for it to be. So I changed that to 100 to 50, and you'll see that updates this, and it'll also update my markups. To bring this back to the front page, if I go to cost events and contract info, If I go to 16, I see that change order. If you remember when I first came in here, it was at 0. It's now in the pending state. So when I go back and approve it, I'm going to see it shift from here to here. And that's exactly what I'm going to do now. I'm going to go into that change order, which is number 60. You can see the statuses are here. I'll hit the approve so you can see those update as well. So I'm going to act as though the architect came in. As well as the owner. And then I'm going to approve this. At any point, this transmit button will create a transmittal, very similar to what happens when you do a submittal. It's just going to wrap this potential change order up and attach it to a transmittal. So if you need to officially transmit it, that's how you do that. Reports, what it does bring is if you hit print item, it's going to basically print this item out and then attach it to this transmittal. So here's what it's laid out as. Again, this may look a little bit different than yours, depending on what you have requested for your change order to look like. But this is what will be attached to that transmittal. I'm going to go back to that screen that we were previously. Contract info. And you'll see that 16 has been moved from pending over to the approved column. We have about 5 minutes left, so I'm going to sync this one actually, and then do an internal and just show you the slight differences between those two, and then that should be good.
I did have someone that has a question, had a number of questions along the way. Sharon, if I unmute you, would you like to, I'm just going to unmute you. Why don't you ask your question?
Thank you. So the two questions were on the markup screen. I didn't see accumulate option to say whether the markup should be based upon not only the prices that you entered, but the prior markups.
Right. We are going to.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. I can answer that one after. What's your second question?
Okay, and then the other question was, when you approved, you said I'm approving all 3 items. Well, what if you only wanted to approve 2 of the items?
Okay, so to answer those in order, the first one, we do not have a cumulative markup at this point. That is a feature request that we are working on. And just for people who may not understand what that means, if you wanted to put a markup on the items that are already marked up, so right now you can see we have a markup of $119. If you are allowed to have 5% on top of that subtotal of $1,200 plus the $119, then you get an additional 10%. That would be the cumulative markup that we're talking about. We don't have that at this point, but we will. The second question, that is not something that can happen right now. If you want to approve one of these 2, right now you'd have to delete the 2 that you don't want to approve and or create another one, either way, to include the ones you're not including or wanting to be approved. So we don't have a way to do single items at this point.
Thank you.
All right, so let me show you an internal event here quickly and how that differs. I'm going to create a new one. Again, you'll see it looks very similar. The only thing that is required is the subject. You'll see the contract item that I could choose from at the other place is not available anymore. As you can see, if you ever just want to reserve numbers, all you need is a subject in the bare minimum. So I could create another one that would be 7 and just put in subjects if I just want to put container for something. Again, the contract item is not available to be selected. Everything else is available. And so typically what would happen on this is that you'd want to do a cost transfer within your budget. Since this is not affecting your schedule of values, this would be the other type underneath contract info. So if I wanted to move from equipment, one from, I don't know, 1040 to 1050. Again, I'll put a -1 and 100 in here. I'm going to move it from this one I'm going to add one more line item. I'm going to say this is a positive 1, 2. Unfortunately, I saw there is no 1050. I'm going to make this a positive 100, and you'll understand from this. Let me just find something there. So basically, what this is doing is moving $100 from the cost code 1040 equipment, putting that $100 into the 2050 equipment with a total cost transfer of $0, which is exactly what you'd want. Then you follow the same process. You approve it, and you can release that to accounting when you're ready to do that. So that's my 30 minutes. Appreciate everybody coming on. The next 1 and 2 weeks is going to be on the commitment side. So like I said, we're going to start from that yellow button that we saw here on the contract side, so you could see how you create a commitment side change order from a contract change order. Kathy is going to send out this recording like she said, as well as any questions that have been typed in. I can get back to you by early next week for sure. So thank you for attending. Kathy, do you have any other closing statements?
That's it. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. And thank you, Brian, for this training session.